Okay, a question that I get from a ton of you is where do I start if I want to start a podcast? And I love when answers are simpler than we expect them to be. So I want to tell you about a resource that's changed the game for us with our podcast, and that is Spotify for podcasters. If you want to start your own podcast, Spotify has a platform that makes it so easy. You upload your episodes and then Spotify actually distributes it everywhere onto all platforms and even helps you earn money so that it can be profitable for you and a blessing for you, your family, your people. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit your podcast literally from your phone or your computer. So if you don't have a fancy setup, it's okay. You can immediately get started today. Then again, you distribute it to Spotify and everywhere else that podcasts are available. You can also do video podcasts, which sounds like a dream to me. And when you want to take conversations with your people to the next level, you can do Q&A and polls, all sorts of fun things. You can earn money with ads and podcast subscriptions, or you can just get started using what you've got for the good of others and the glory of God. Check out Spotify for Podcasters. I use it. I love it. I highly recommend it. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app. I have it on my phone, highly suggest, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Hey friends, you're listening to the Go and Tell Gals podcast, and I'm your host, Jess Conlon. In most of our episodes, we'll have a guest, a woman who is running on mission right where she's at. We pray this podcast leaves you encouraged and spurred on to go and tell the good news. Hey gals, it is our Motherhood and Mission Week here at the Go and Tell Gals podcast. Leading up to Mother's Day, we are talking about all things mission and motherhood, how to run on mission as a mother, how to experience mission even if you're not a mother and are called to spiritual motherhood or just shepherding other women. We're talking to so many different types of women. And today we are talking to Morgan Harper Nichols, who has truly mothered and shepherded so many women through her art and through her poetry, and is now gearing up to become a physical mother as she's pregnant with her first child. So enjoy this episode with Morgan. She is gentle and inspiring, and God is mighty in her. What a treat we have today. We are talking briefly with Morgan Harper Nichols, who you all know and love. If you don't, you have got to find her online. You will love her and be so inspired. Morgan, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. As you know, I'm a huge fan of what you do, so it's an honor to be here.
Ditto. You know I'm a huge fan. I am actually literally with my eyes looking at a print of one of your poems. And
oh, wow.
I just always wonder, how does it feel to have written words and made art that have encouraged, inspired, and given wings and energy to so many people all over the world?
You know, it's very humbling, and I sometimes I hesitate to use that word because I feel like it gets used a lot, but honestly, it's such a reminder to me of how everything I do is so much bigger than me. It's beyond me, because I think it's so easy when we're creating anything to get stuck in our heads of maybe I'm not approaching this right, or maybe I'm not doing this in the right way. But once it actually gets out there and you see what happens with it and you see what God can do with it, it's like, oh, wow, this is so much beyond what I had imagined. And that's a beautiful thing. So that's why I use the word humbling, because it's like, oh, wow, I put all this pressure on myself. But once you're speaking from the heart and you put it out there, it gets where it needs to go.
Okay, I've got a quick understanding of how this all came about, but I know you've been involved with art, creativity, ministry, using your gifts for a while, but will you just give everybody a quick snapshot of how you got to where you're at right now and what work, what mission, what your ministry looks like on a day-to-day basis right now?
Yes, I'll kind of give like a quick version of my life story because it makes sense to what I'm doing now. But I am a homeschooled preacher's kid. So I grew up in like a small town in a house with one other sibling. So we were like a weird homeschool family because there was just two of us. So a lot of times homeschool families have like multiple kids, but not us. It was just the two of us. And my dad was a pastor of a really small church. So I was like in a very small world. And because of that, I feel like it really helped nurture a lot of creativity within me. I had to use my imagination a lot. My sister and I had an embarrassing amount of imaginary friends. Like we had like a whole village. Like she had her crew and I had my crew, and they would like communicate and get together. It was just off the wall. So I don't think I've ever shared that before. So Jamie, if you're listening, I hope you're okay with that.
Sorry, Jamie.
And our mom, especially our mom and our dad, they really encouraged us to be very creative. So it's always been within me, and just seeing my parents in ministry, like those two things were always hand in hand. I always saw it come out before me. But in terms of seeing it as a part of my career or something I would do, beyond school, that wasn't much of a thought of mine. I mean, I thought about it a little bit, but I was like, oh, I'll probably work like a 9-to-5 job, and that's okay with me. Yeah. And, do creative things on the side. So that was sort of my thought process. But what ended up happening, long story short, was that a lot of the things that I was interested in doing in terms of like test scores and things like that, like that wasn't really the direction that I could really go in. And the arts was something that on paper, it was starting to make sense. It was like, wow, this might be something that I can pursue. This might be something that, maybe God is calling me to and that I need to look a little further into. So even though I was definitely apprehensive, especially just being a little bit more naturally introverted and kind of keeping to myself, I was still a little apprehensive, but I ended up just trying many different things through music and through photography. And before I knew it, I was in college and I was really involved in a lot of different creative ways. And I would try things, but I always kind of had just like a little bit of hesitation, sometimes a lot of bit of hesitation as to really wanting to put myself out there. So an example of that would be I would start a blog, but I wouldn't put my name on it. I wouldn't put my picture on it because I was like, all right, I'm going to write, I'm going to create, but I'm not really sure if I'm ready to fully commit as myself. That pattern has just repeated itself over and over in my life. And it continued even after college. One of the biggest breaking points was honestly when I was 26, and that was when I was kind of in an interesting spot career-wise, and I was feeling really discouraged. And I sat down and I wrote a poem for like the first time in years. And that poem starts with, when you start to feel like things should have been better this year, remember the mountains and valleys that brought you here. And those words just kind of became the theme of what I would say was my quarter life crisis of just feeling like, I was like, oh, should I have this more figured out by now? Like maybe I should just give up being a creative. If I can't really do it the way that others are doing it, I'm not as successful as this person, or I don't really fit in this market. I don't fit in that market either. Maybe I should just give up. So that poem kind of came out of that. And I ended up sharing that poem on Pinterest. And I shared it on Pinterest instead of sharing it on Instagram or Facebook because I was like, nobody I know really follows me on Pinterest. So I was like, this is just my way of getting it out there. No one's going to see it. It's like, there, boom, I did it. Move on to the next thing. So this was in November of 2016. And then at the beginning of 2017, I got a message on Instagram where someone was like, hey, did you see this reality star? She posted a poem that you wrote on her page. Like your name is on a poem, because I wasn't writing poetry or anything. No one knew that. And I was like, yeah, that is mine. How did she even find that? So I told her, I was like, thank you for sharing my piece. And I just kind of went on. And then a few days later, someone was like, did you see this athlete share your poem on their Instagram? I was like, I have no idea how they found that. So I was like, you know what? Let me go back and look at that Pinterest post that I did. And I had no idea, but that pin had been repinned over 100,000 times. And I don't even remember putting tags on that pen. I didn't link it to a website, nothing. It was just a picture. There wasn't even any art. It was just a picture of the poem from my notebook, and I posted it on Pinterest. Wow. So I was like, wow, like I did not expect that. People started to ask me, do you write more like this? Like, do you have more of this topic? And I was like, no, not really. Like, that was kind of like the one moment that I made something like that. But people were asking. So I spent 2017 honestly responding to that ask. Hey, is there something here? And I was like, you know what? If strangers on the internet who I don't know are asking me, I think there's something here. Even if I can't see it, I'm just going to trust that there's something here. So I spent all of 2017 carving away, trying all of these creative things that I honestly kind of left behind in high school and college. And then I got toward the end of 2017 and I was like, you know what? I was still kind of dealing with a lot of the self-doubt and not really wanting to fully put myself out there. And I was like, what can I do to continue doing this and not constantly be concerned about, well, am I doing this the right way? Am I putting myself out there too much? What can I do? And I looked at my Instagram and I don't remember how many people were following me at that time. But I remember looking at that number and I was like, you know what? This is like a few thousand people. I was like, if I could just create something for each of these people one by one and not focus on the number as a whole and not focus on the bigger picture of, you know, the billions of people who are out there and the billions of people who are active on social media. If I could just focus on one person at a time, I think that would give me a lot of peace and that would help keep me grounded. And you know, looking back on that now, that just really kind of ties back into my childhood and the way that I saw my parents, especially the way I saw my parents do ministry. They were so one-on-one with people, you know, in our really small community. And I think I was just kind of going back to that place of just like one by one person at a time. So I posted on my Instagram story. I was like, hey, if you would like for me to write something for you, I'll keep your story private. I won't share it with anyone. And I'll create something with your story in mind and I'll send it to you and then I'll share it with everyone else. And I was thinking that maybe I would do it for a week or two, but that was in October 2017. And here we are now in 2019, and I'm still doing that. And I'm still creating pretty much on a weekly basis now. I have people submit their stories on my website now, and I just randomly scroll through an email that I have where I just scroll through the email and I'll just randomly stop on a name and I'll open that email and I'll create something just for that person and I'll send it to them and then I'll share it with everyone else.
Amazing. And the thing is, it's life-changing. I know because you're humbled over it. It's beautiful, but it is genuinely life-changing. And what's crazy and so cool about the internet and mission is that it's wildly life-changing for that person that you've created that art for. And then God just blows on it and expands it like way beyond the horizons of what anybody will ever be able to see besides him. And so I'm just so thankful for your willingness, for the fact that you see it as ministry and as mission, and that you let him bring those gifts so solidly to the surface. Because what I capture about that story is no one was doing this. You know what I'm saying? No one was saying like, I'll create art and poems for people individually and let the Spirit speak through me in those ways. And you did, because it's who he made you to be and it's what he gave you to do. And it's changing people's lives everywhere, which is just amazing.
It just goes beyond me. Like I'm still trying to like understand what's happening here. But at the same time, that's kind of the point. It's not about understanding, you know, it's about just trusting and continuing on. So yeah. I'm grateful that you picked up on that.
I feel it. Every time I see one of your pieces as a lock screen on one of my friends' phones, or like out in public, if I'll see it on somebody's phone or something like that, I'm like, dang, thanks God. Like, thanks God for how you use her. That is incredible. And just an incredible seat you get to have in people's lives too, you know, that maybe you don't even perceive or feel, but that he's just using your art and your color and your words and your vibrancy in just such beautiful ways.
Thank you.
I'm so blessed. And in the middle of all that, you got pregnant.
Yeah. Yes.
So talk about that.
Yeah. So in October of 2018, which is right around me and my husband's 8th wedding anniversary, that's when we found out we were pregnant. So we had talked about trying to get pregnant for many years and, having children in whatever way they would come to our family in some capacity. But we were kind of like not really in a rush. We were just like, oh, it'll happen, maybe next year. And then we would say, maybe next year. And then last year, I guess God was like, this is the year that's going to happen. So we're really grateful. Right now, I'm 34 weeks. So coming around the bend, and just this pregnancy has taught me so much. And one of the main things that it's taught me, and I've heard that, even after you give birth, that this continues, of just having to be present and be still and can't be as rushed as you were before. I didn't realize until I got pregnant and I started dealing with a lot of fatigue. I didn't realize that I had really been overworking myself. Just because I'm very grateful that I get to do something that I love as my job. But the downside of that is sometimes you can just work and not even realize that you're sitting there for 12, 14 hours a day working on something. And it's like, when's the last time I've had sunshine? When is the last time I've gotten up and stretched? And being pregnant made me realize I've spent a lot of time working. And that first trimester, I just couldn't do it. I was just tired. Even with the project where I'm writing for people, I used to do that every day, Monday through Friday. That was just kind of my morning routine. Even if I could only spend 30 minutes on it, I would just start the day working on that. But now it's moved to once a week. And that was very hard for me because I was like, this was a part of my routine. I had my whole routine going, and, you just have to start making those adjustments. So that was the biggest thing I've learned. And then, also I was just really nervous about the process of just being pregnant and just the whole concept of another human being inside of me. That was just so foreign to me. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready, but I've just learned that many things in life, we're often more ready than we feel like we are. I feel like I've learned that. I didn't think I was ready, but now that I'm in it, I was ready. I was ready, at least from a foundational standpoint of I was ready to learn. I was ready to grow. Not that I have it all figured out. I'm still learning, but I definitely realized I was stronger than I thought I was. I was more equipped than I thought I was to walk through this season. And I think that applies with any season in our lives. When it's ahead of you and it hasn't happened yet, you're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to walk through that. Even challenging seasons, there's no way I'm going to be able to walk through it. But when you're in it, you're like, maybe I am a little bit stronger than I think. Maybe I do have, what it takes to at least take this day by day.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I'll be interested to hear, maybe we can do a check back in, but I'll be interested to hear in that season of new motherhood now. Everybody talks about early motherhood with just these extreme exhaustion labels over it. And obviously there's different levels of sleep that you're getting, and you're physically depleted in different ways. But what is interesting to me is that I think back on every single one of my newborn seasons with this overwhelming sense of grace, just in how forced you are to slow down, to sit and feed another human, to change a diaper. Your pace is slower, and I'll be interested to see how those forced moments of rest and connection also deepen your love for your work and deepen your perception of your work. When people ask me all the time, is being a working mom harder? Sure, there's challenges all around it, but what I find is that being a mom doesn't make my work better. It doesn't shift it outwardly as much for everyone else, but it shifts the way I value it personally. It has given me a new perception on it. And so I think it'll just be so interesting to watch, even specifically early motherhood shade this season of your mission.
Yeah, that's something I definitely think about too, because it's I know it'll change. Even if I'm not sure how ready I am for it, I'm I need that change. I need to be open to what this new season is going to bring. Yeah, especially like you said, just grace. That is something I've always really struggled with, especially understanding what grace looks like for myself. And that's one of the reasons why I write about it a lot. And I've been working on trying to figure out how to get this into like a long form blog post or a video or something, because a lot of people ask me, what do you mean by grace? What do you mean by that? And I'm like, look, I can tell you what grace means, but just please know I'm still figuring it out myself. That's why I write about it so much, because I'm the kind of person where like I can give grace to other people and I can encourage them and say like, yes, like there's grace for where you are. But when it comes to myself, I'm like, no, you should have worked a little bit harder. You should have gotten a little bit more done before you had a baby. You should have been able to get this done. This is a little too much rest. And just realizing, I'm like, you know what? That's not how I would speak to the people that I love. So I'm not going to speak to myself that way. My sister is actually pregnant too, which is really funny. She's 2 weeks behind me and we did not plan it at all. She actually came over to our house. They came over to our house to tell us they were pregnant. And I was like, funny story, I'm 2 weeks ahead of you. And she was like, of course you are, because she's younger than me. I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still 2 weeks ahead of you here.
I love it.
When I'm talking to my sister and I'm encouraging her, it's like, I have to say those same things to myself. I'm worthy of those same kinds of encouraging words. And it's so easy to look at people that we love or people that we look up to and say, oh no, that's fine. Like, take your time, rest, you need it, you deserve it. But it's like, how often do we say those things to ourselves? So that's something I've really been working on, because oftentimes when I turn that lens on myself, I just get so critical. That's something that's become, even prior to the birth, that's become something that I've been working on, because when I think about having our son, I'm like, that's something I want him to speak kindly about himself too. I don't want him to beat himself up. I don't want him to think that he's not worthy of grace and that he's not worthy of rest, that he can't have those things. So, we have to model that before him. And we have to do that for ourselves. So even phrases like self-care, like that was never a part of my vocabulary until I started seeing it on social media a year ago. I was like, self-care. Okay, that makes sense. But what is that? Bubble baths? Like, like, I don't know what that means. So even just digging more into like taking care of myself, I'm like, well, I want my children to take care of themselves. So I have to take care of myself. They have to see me doing that. So what is that going to look like? So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm really grateful for, that I've started to kind of share my art online and some of these things that I'm having to work on, because even just hearing people's stories, it's made me think about things I have to work on in my own life. I'm like, here I am encouraging someone to see themselves as the gift that they are and to not put themselves down because they went through a rough season. I have to believe that for myself too, even as I'm sharing it with others. So I'm like, as I get ready to share that with my son, I have to believe that for myself too. So.
I love that. Okay, what's helping? What tools or tips or tricks are helping in this season of mission, but also like preparing for motherhood? Is there anything that's working?
Yes, this is kind of like I feel like such a simple one, but it's just such a part of my life now, and that's taking naps. I've heard that sleeping is going to change very soon, sleeping patterns, and I love my sleep.
Maybe. So, you don't know. I mean, you can just come out with the perfect sleeper. You never
That's true. That is very true. But yeah, I've just realized, like the past few days, I took a nap every day, like the past 4 days. And a year ago, Morgan, I wouldn't have been able to tell you the last time I took a nap. I do not take naps. Like even if I'm on like a long flight or a long car ride and I'm just sitting there, I do not go to sleep. I pull out my laptop, I pull out my iPad, I get to work, I do things. Like I do not take naps. So I've just been amazed. It's so practical. It's like, duh, Morgan, but I've been amazed at like waking up from a nap. I'm like, wow, I feel refreshed. I feel like I can carry on the rest of this day. So that's been a big one.
I love it. Whenever I take a nap, I always think like, I cannot believe naps are free.
Yes.
I cannot believe naps are free.
Yes.
I can't believe we just get to do this for free. So
I know. It's wonderful.
It's really nice. I love it. So I get asked a lot of random questions online about what lipstick I'm wearing or where I got my shirt from. And usually the answer is pretty unimpressive. I don't know. Target. But there's one question that I get asked very often, and it's an answer that I love to tell. And that is, almost anytime someone asks where I got my shoes, I'm able to say Able. If you don't know about Able, Able is a women's ethical fashion brand on mission to challenge the culture of the fashion industry by creating transformative opportunities for women. And I came in contact with the owner of Able a handful of years ago and fell in love with their company, and not only with their company, but also with their products. If you have seen the cover for my book that comes out in September, You Are the Girl for the Job, we knew we wanted to have Able shoes on the cover. Those shoes that you see right there are some of my favorite shoes that I wear all the time, that I love so often. But I also love their bags. I love their clothing. I love their jewelry. And in lieu of a wedding ring, I wear an Able ring that says the word temple on it. I love that they are a woman-led business, transforming the lives of the women that they work with. And I love that they make incredible products and that they have a strong mission. And they are doing an exclusive discount just for Go and Tell Gals podcast listeners. You can get 20% off everything on their website using the coupon code GOANDTELL20. So if you've ever wondered where my shoes are from, or just where I like to get my shoes from, or a lot of my jewelry, or my bags, or some of my clothes, I love Able. I love what they stand for. I love what they're doing. I love their mission, and I love their culture, and I love their products. You can find them at livefashionable.com. And again, that coupon code is GOANDTELL20. Curious. I believe that I might already know the answer to this, but what's your Enneagram number?
I am a 5 with a 4 wing. Okay. So yes. So that's been very interesting. Also being pregnant, because, 5s are not in their bodies at all. So, being forced to really be in my body and get out of that headspace has been and my husband's an 8, so he's like, yeah, let's go. Like we were just at the gym this morning, and I'm just like trying to keep up with him. He's such like a body type, such a doer. And I'm like, Morgan, just, get out of your head, get into your body. And yeah, so.
I love it. So good. Okay. A few other just fun questions for you. Any books that you've read lately that have just shifted you, changed you, helped so much?
Oh, wow. There are so many. This particular one, I already read it, but I just read it again. It's not a new book, but I just read it again. And that was The Sacred Enneagram by Chris Hewart. One thing I love about it is he has different practices, like in the back of the book, on different ways to pray for your Enneatype. And for me, that was silence. And that just hit me hard because I am not a fan of silence. I don't make a lot of room for that in my life. So that's just really been challenging me in my prayer life, in my devotional life, because so many times, when I just sit down to have time with God, I'm like, okay, what can I write about this? What can I get down on paper and just really dig into this? And sometimes we just need to be present and not worry so much about what our brains have to say about it. So that was a really good recent read. And then I read On the Brink of Everything by Parker Palmer. And I don't know what drew me to this book, but it's actually a book on like the final stage of life and getting ready, because he's maybe in his 80s, and just talking about like his life experiences and different things that he's learned, and having to embrace the season of knowing your life is going to end. I know that might sound really morbid, but it's just the way that he writes. I mean, it just made me so grateful for life, and I really got a lot out of that book. So
I love that. Okay, last question, and this is a little bit of a left turn, but how can podcast listeners pray for you just in these next few weeks and months?
That's so kind. I would say prayers for embracing new rhythms in life. Being an Enneagram 5, I love my systems. I love to have things figured out exactly the way I wanted and planning it all out. So just being in a place where it's not so much about thinking it through, and it's just about being present. I think I answered that question.
Yes, you did.
Kind of like an audible journal entry there.
Absolutely. Well, Hey, everybody, as you're listening, just pause, take a minute, thank God for Morgan, thank God for her gifts, the gift that he's given her, thank God for the words he's given her. And in Jesus' name, we just pray rest and passion and peace and productivity as much as God would write into this season. We pray that he would stretch out the hours in the sweetest time. And we thank you for this friend and all you're doing in and through her. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Morgan.
Amen.
Girl, thank you for taking time to talk with us. We're so, so, so grateful.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for creating the space. I'm very grateful.
My actual joy. Thank you, friend.
Thank you.